Welcome to the WCC media briefing. An ecumenical delegation held a digital and pastoral solidarity visit to the Holy Land on 7 to 8 of August. A visit that has served as an opportunity to accompany member churches and ecumenical partners, listen to their voices and perspectives, amplify their calls, and remind the world of what is needed to bring about peace in the region. The WCC leadership was scheduled to visit the Holy Land and Gaza in person on 5 to 9 August. Together with two humanitarian organizations, ACT Alliance and Caritas Internationalis. The visit was postponed, however, in view of the most recent developments in the area. The online delegation included the WCC General Secretary, WCC Moderator, member of WCC Central and Executive Committee, and ecumenical partners from the Middle East Council of Churches and the ACT Alliance, Caritas Internationalis, and accompanied by staff. The situation in Gaza has reached a critical point, with 500,000 people on the brink of starvation and the entire population facing acute food shortages. While all media attention is on Gaza, there is another front underway in the West Bank. In late July and early August, signs of potential further escalation with the evident risk of a war quickly spreading through the region and beyond. That has been the main focus during the 2 days online delegation, to listen to the local stories from the West Bank and Gaza and accompany the people of the Holy Land. Let's take time to listen to the members of the delegation. It's a pleasure to introduce the online delegation and the panel for this media briefing. Bishop Dr. Heinrich Bedford Strawn, moderator of the World Council of Churches. Reverend Professor Dr. Jerry Pillet, General Secretary of the World Council of Churches. Dr. Ode Kawas, member of the WCC Central Committee and Executive Committee, and a medical doctor. Professor Dr. Michelle Abs, General Secretary of the Middle East Council of Churches. Rudelmar Bueno de Faria, General Secretary of the ACT Alliance, and Alistair Dutton, Secretary General, Caritas Internationalis. I would like to turn first of all to Dr. Pillet, and I would like to ask you, what is the impressions of the conversation you have been participating for the last 2 days? The floor is yours.
The World Council of Churches, ACT Alliance, and Caritas International were supposed to do a joint visit to Jerusalem, and our intention was really to visit Gaza, given the realities of the situation there. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible, but we still had this digital visit and conversations with numerous people. One of the deepest impressions upon me in this visit was the conversations with people who are working in Gaza. And I thought the stories that they shared, the information that they gave to us, the kind of visibility they created through words, images, was deep and powerful to make us realize the absolute reality, the struggle, the pain, and the suffering of the people in Gaza, but also in Palestine at large. I think this created a deeper understanding of what was taking place. We listen to the media all the time. We see pictures, we hear stories. But when you speak to people who are on the ground and organizations that are actually involved in the everyday lives of people who are struggling in Gaza, that becomes a new reality, a new experience of profound pain and depth of reality that is communicated through these stories. So the impression that I have from this particular visit is that even though it wasn't an in-person one, it had the ability to communicate significantly the deep emotions, not only in the context of Gaza, but our conversations with virtually all the people that we have spoken to communicated the reality of the situation, outlined the seriousness, the deep escalation of the situation, the need for the ceasefire, and the end to the war, the need for humanitarian access and aid to be provided, and the need to say this is enough, the world needs to stop, to listen, and the international communities in particular need to respond more immediately, urgently, and significantly to the real situation that has been felt on the ground in the Israel-Palestine context, and especially now in the war in Gaza. So as far as I have experienced this particular conversations, it was deep, profound, and powerful in terms of realizing the need to get involved and to get involved with significant change.
Thank you, Dr. Pillay. Then I will turn to Dr. Abs, General Secretary for the Middle East Christian Council of Churches. And I have the same question. What kind of impressions do you carry with you from the 2 days online visit to the Holy Land?
Well, this visit is, as I told you, is a message of hope, is a message of love provided by the international Christian community, because it involves Caritas with the World Council of Churches towards this area, which is living now a very, very dangerous period. You know that not only Palestine, but Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine are on a volcano, and people are living a very tough period, very hard times, expecting war at any moment. And you know that there is an escalation of aggressions in South Lebanon, as well as in northern Palestine, and at the same time in Gaza. So such a visit, even if it's a virtual one, you know, a virtual visit is the next best way of being there when you can't be there. So this is a sign of solidarity, a sign of love from the international community towards the people of the area who are suffering for a long time. And for the more reason for the people of Palestine who have been under occupation for 76 years, more than 76 years. This visit is done by people of faith and of love who are coming to bring hope to the people who tend to see, are in the danger of not seeing any more horizon for their future. This is why the people are emigrating in any way from Palestine, from anywhere, and for the more reason Christians are leaving. So this visit is a sort of a challenge of the status quo towards the humanity, towards the whole world, and the message of promise for a better tomorrow. Now, what can we do after that? We have to think about it all together to see what kind of activities. Mainly it should be towards lobbying, advocacy, and awareness building for the Christian community worldwide to understand better what's going on, to understand better what they should read in their holy books, and to know better that the people in the land here are subject to oppression, subject to mistreatment, subject to genocide. Even we can talk about ethnic cleansing being operated there, and this should stop somewhere, and that emptying the land and filling it with some other people is not the solution for a supposed Messiah to come tomorrow. Christ came, and he made this his salvation message, his salvation mission for humanity, and we should carry on with the Christian love to help the people remaining in the land to carry on their lives.
Thanks for that. Then we turn to Alistair Dutton. What are the greatest challenges in the Holy Land today from your point of view? You have a huge experience of the field and what you have heard and seen during the 2 days session.
Thanks, Marianne. And I think the conversations of the last 2 days have been very sobering, continue to be very sobering. I continue to be appalled by the complete disregard for human life and the disproportionate, indiscriminate attacks which are repeatedly driving people from where they have already fled. We can't talk about their homes anymore. They left those long ago, and now they are just moving from place to place within the Gaza Strip. Having seen their homes and the buildings around them blown to smithereens. The level of human suffering is outrageous. People are on the point of starvation. and there's no water, electricity, drainage. Healthcare has collapsed with direct hits on hospitals and clinics, and the absence of the most basic medical supplies. The border remains closed and humanitarian access is almost nil, the people being deliberately deprived of the humanitarian assistance they so desperately need. And that's most specifically the situation in Gaza. But I think what was clear throughout the conversations we've had is that is becoming more and more the case throughout the West Bank as well. When I was there in November, I was able still to travel relatively freely around the West Bank. That's not the situation today. And the level of violence, the attacks on civilians in the West Bank, while not at the same level as the Gaza Strip itself, are becoming truly horrific. So I think, what do I take away from it? What do we need? We need an immediate, unconditional, permanent ceasefire. And we need an end to the indiscriminate bombing and killing of civilians. That's first and foremost in all of this. We need an immediate end to the supply of weapons to Israel for as long as they continue to use them against the Palestinians in the way that they're doing. From a humanitarian perspective, we need open border crossings, and we need safe access to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance and the private sector and all the private goods that were crossing the border in order to provide the humanitarian assistance at the scale that is urgently needed. And as I said, people are already starving. We are facing famine conditions in the Gaza Strip today. We need the adherence to human rights and international humanitarian law. We need the rule of law again, including the protection of civilians, civilian assets, and humanitarian workers. And we need the immediate release of the remaining Israeli hostages, and some 9,500 was the previous number, and now there's probably another 6,000. So call it 15,000 Palestinians who are today arbitrarily detained by Israel without charge or rule of law. And so I also take away the great courage and perseverance of people in the country and in the region. And I'd like to commend the incredible work and witness of Caritas Jerusalem and all the agencies of Caritas, Action by Churches Together, and the churches and their service for the people in the region.
Thank you very much, Alistair Dutton. Dr. Cowles, thanks for taking the time to meet with the panel for the media briefing. And you have been one of the local contacts for organizing the online visit. What is the deeper meaning from your point of view to have the leaders of the WCC, ACT Alliance, Caritas Internationalis, and MSCC present online for almost, I think, 10 meetings, and I think we met around 60 locals?
For me, as a local, without thinking that also I am at the governing board of the WCC, it was an opportunity to feel that people are still with us, that people are still feeling what we are suffering in Palestine, what kind of injustices which we are suffering, which is against all the international laws. Of course, my first choice was that I hoped that the visit will be in person. But unfortunately, when you depend on your decision on security issues, you will have a mess. Today is the 9th, which was the day that the group will depart from here. And accordingly, nothing happened. So all what was said about security issues, although there is always a risk, each moment there is a risk about the security issue. But I think that everybody, from the locals, including the head of the churches who could attend, and especially my patriarch, Patriarch Theophilus III, Patriarch of Jerusalem, was very pleased to be part of the first meetings of this solidarity visit through online. We hope that this will not stop here only, that you as a communication department, you have done a very good job until now, but this needs continuation with all the other communication departments of the organizations which was with this solidarity visit, Caritas Internationalis and ACT Alliance, and wherever, if we can, input our member churches of the WCC. I think that this must spread very quickly to everybody in time, while still we are waiting for ceasefire and for peace. This is the main objective of whatever we are doing, irregardless about we like politics or we don't like politics. But peace must prevail. And peace must prevail according to the international law and according to the Security Council decisions. It's time now to stop thinking that the two people, the Palestinians and the Israeli, can reach between themselves and alone to a solution. I think the solution is present and everybody is satisfied with it through the international law and through the Security Council decisions. I request, before starting implementing those decisions according to the Article 7 of the UN Charter, I think that the WCC have to start moving, supporting an international conference so as to reach to a unanimous decision about implementing those decisions which are for the benefit of both the Israelis and the Palestinians. It's time and it's enough, and it's more than enough, killing all those innocent people, demolishing even the infrastructure of the camps and the towns, not only in Gaza, but also in Jenin, in Tulkarem, in Nablus. And only to think that those camps, how they can live without after destroying their sewage system, after they're destroying their electricity supplies and their water supplies. I don't know why. Is the infrastructure an enemy, or they want us to go back to live as we've been living before 200 years? I have to thank especially here the moderator of the WCC. I can see now that there is many changes in his perspectives about the case of Palestine, as well as our General Secretary, Professor Dr. Reverend Jerry Billet, where since he took office, he did not left the Palestinian issue, not even an hour. And always we are in his heart, as well as the ACT Alliance, in which they are doing a tremendous job to enable us and to enable the Department of Service to Palestinian refugees, which is part of the Middle East Council of Churches, to work in Gaza, even under those very bad circumstances. But still, we need much more help, not in money, but in support. This is what I would like to convey, and I will never forget the Caritas Internationalis about its participation. And I would like, although I know that their agenda is completely different than the agendas of the WCC, but I hope that they can work with the WCC in strengthening the Christian presence in the region and especially in the Holy Land by supporting the educational institutions which are working under the auspices of the churches of the Holy Land.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kawas, and our thoughts and prayers with you and the people of the Holy Land. Then I ask Rudemar Bueno de Faria, who is the General Secretary of ACT Alliance, with also a huge amount of work going on in both Gaza and in the West Bank. And what is your take away from the 2 days visit so far, and what would you like to share with us?
Yeah, thank you very much, Marianne, for the questions. And yeah, during my participation in this digital solidarity visit to the Holy Land, I was deeply moved by the testimonies of the local voices who courageously share their experiences amidst the occupation and also the ongoing conflict going there. The challenges they face are numerous and deeply interconnected. All of this rooted in an unbelievable lack of humanity that perpetuates a long and illegal occupation of the occupied territories of Palestine. One of the most pressing challenges that I realized based on our conversations is the impact of the disproportional warfare. The local communities in Gaza and the West Bank are living under constant threat, but with devastating consequences on their daily lives. We mentioned about the number of people that are in prison or have lost their lives. The scale and intensity of the military actions are vastly disproportionate, resulting in widespread destructions, loss of innocent lives, and deep psychological scars. Additionally, the hindrance to the delivery of humanitarian assistance is critical. And it was mentioned by all the parts that we met. The restrictions and the blockades are severely limiting the ability of humanitarian organizations to provide much needed aid, including food, water, and medical supplies. And this not only exacerbates the suffering of the people, but also, as Alistair mentioned, violates basic human rights and international humanitarian law. The violations of human rights are pervasive, with countless stories of arbitrary detentions, forced evictions, it was mentioned that in the West Bank, and violent suppression of peaceful protests, even with drones that they are using now. And these actions undermine the dignity and rights of the Palestinian people, perpetuating a cycle of injustice and despair that we know, as Dr. Abs mentioned, for more than 70 years. I must also express my profound disappointment with the international community response. There has been a disturbing normalization of the atrocities committed in Gaza and West Bank, and a glaring lack of decisive actions to secure a ceasefire. There is no political will by all the parties involved. And these inactions not only emboldened further violations, but also erodes our collective moral integrity, I would say. And the challenges faced by the medical personnel are particularly distressing. We met with them. They were in Gaza, others in the West Bank. And they operate under incredible dangerous conditions with inadequate resources, equipment, and constant threats to their own safety. And the logistical difficulties in providing humanitarian assistance are immense. Yet these brave individuals, the medical doctors or the people working with health, continue to serve with strong dedication. It's amazing. In light of these grave challenges that we heard from people, my call is for justice and immediate action. It's imperative that the international community, including churches and faith-based organizations, amplify their efforts to bring an end to the conflict, the permanent ceasefire, as was mentioned. We must advocate for the respect of the international humanitarian law, support humanitarian assistance delivery, and work towards a just and lasting peace, or the just peace as we used to say. We must also push governments to respect and underpin the International Court of Justice ruling, to strengthen our common resolve towards international law. And the situation in the Holy Land is a profound test of our humanity. Our response to this crisis will define how we are perceived as a global community, including a Christian community. And so let's rise to these challenges with compassion, courage, and a strong commitment for justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudemar. Then we will turn to Bishop Heinrich Bedford Strom, and we would like to invite you to also share a little bit what you have heard and seen in the Holy Land during the 2 days visit, and also what is needed to bring peace in the region, and what is the special call to the world from your point of view as the moderator of the World Council of Churches?
Well, this visit was a deep impression on me, and it was a very important visit for us as World Council of Churches, for our mandate as World Council of Churches, as a voice of Christianity in this global context of politics, but also of humanity. We have seen and heard so many stories of suffering in these 2 days. And I think what we need to be as churches is ambassadors of these stories. We need to spread the news about what people are suffering in this context globally. And I think that it's not just a matter of politics, it's a matter of faith. We believe in a God that has shown in a human being, Jesus Christ, in a human being who has died as a victim of violence, who has died on the cross, who has died with a cry of despair, my God, why have you forsaken me? And this cry of despair, I heard this cry of despair in the stories that we heard in these 2 days. I think of what the doctors in the Gaza Strip have told us. One doctor said, he's a pediatrician. He said, I have seen about 300 children today, and 104 of them were starving, were malnutritioned. That is something that cries to heaven, that children cannot get enough food because of political circumstances. So from this story of suffering, there must be a call, a global call, to end this suffering in the Gaza Strip, where people do not get what they need to live, where people do not get enough food, do not get enough medication, where people do not know where to go anymore, because every place in this region of the world is a place of danger. This must stop. And we as churches are advocating a development, a political development that might open the door towards a just peace, so the suffering ends. There is no Jewish suffering, no Arab suffering, no Christian suffering, or whatever else suffering. There's only human suffering. And that is why the mother in the Gaza Strip, who carries her dead baby from the rubble of bombed buildings, sheds the same tears as the mother of a hostage that is still kept by Hamas or that has already died. We must develop a radical sensitivity towards suffering, no matter on what side it happens. That is our calling as Christians. And I think that we, as the World Council of Churches, as a fellowship of 352 churches all over the world with completely different contexts, we must be a loudspeaker to point towards this suffering. We have seen much, and a lot of the impressions that come from this digital visit are still in my heart, and I will reflect upon them. I will feel the consequences, and I will have a lot of thought that I will invest in order to process what I have heard and seen. And I simply thank from the bottom of my heart all those who have helped us to get these insights. I praise the doctors in the Gaza Strip. They are heroes. One of the people in our talk has told us that also the doctors are living in tents. They sometimes do not have enough to eat either. They need to move with mobile medical units to wherever there might be a safe place. And nevertheless, they do their service. They have impressed me very much. In the end, I think we can maybe take very seriously what one of the doctors said. One doctor said, "Moon is rising in the darkness." He was pointing towards the light that comes also in darkness, sometimes even from darkness. That is the hope that we as Christians stand for. And we want to express this hope not only with our prayer, with our telling stories, but also with our action. That is what we are called to do. And as a consequence of this visit, we will reflect very intensely about what that means.
Thank you very much, Bishop Heinrich Bedford-Strom. Then I would like to have a final round, invite each of you to think a little bit more from a personal perspective, what you take with you. Have you already responded to that in the first round? Then I would like to ask you to think about the local and the global perspective, because we really invite all the churches around the world. So what are you also able to encourage, empower the churches to take action wherever you are in the world? So I would like to invite Jerry first to enter the floor. Dr. Pillay, what do you take with you from a more personal perspective? I don't know if this is the first online visit in your leadership as the WCC General Secretary, so feel free to also share a little bit from a practical point of view.
Well, it's not the first one. Of course, I've had conversations with Palestine, Israel online in last year, this year, several such meetings. But this was the first sort of unique approach where we have been working with other partners, with the humanitarian organizations. And that has been really good, that point of view. I've been very much involved in this situation, not only in my time as General Secretary, since starting on the 1st of January in 2023, but I've been involved in this many years before as well, reflecting, writing, visiting, and dealing with situations in the Palestinian context. And I think even out of today's, or this discussion that we've had in these 2 days, what emerged so much more powerfully is that even with all of these years, we're still stuck with the situation. And it's got worse rather than getting any better. And I come out of these conversations with a deep sense of grief and sadness that authorities and people who have opportunity to sit down and dialogue and find solutions to the problems are not doing that. Instead, they choose the way of violence, and they choose the way of unnecessary suffering. They choose the way in which thousands of people are being killed. They choose the way of absolute destruction, where buildings and property and lives are being destroyed. They choose the way of something that is totally nonsensical in terms of trying to deal with issues and deal with problems. Whether they deal with it with violence now, the time will come when they will have to make peace. And when they do sit down to make peace, dialogue must be the way forward. So my concern is, why do it later in the midst of so much of distraction and death when you can do it now? And so I come out of these discussions a lot more grieved by the sadness and the depth of feeling, the heavy burden of how human beings continue to behave. and of how people in political authority and power misuse that so that masses continue to suffer. I walk out of this with a deeper sense of urgency that hope must prevail. And the message of the church for justice and reconciliation and unity and peace must come to light. We can never give up in the midst of struggle and suffering. We must never give up. Our Bible, our scriptures, the way of Jesus Christ calls us into peace. And so I leave this kind of discussions with a deeper sense of resolve and a greater sense of passion to be involved not only in this struggle, but in all struggles in the world as General Secretary of the WCC, where peace is needed. And as many people know, the World Council of Churches is involved in many other countries, in Ukraine and Russia, in Sudan, in Democratic Republic of Congo, in Colombia, to name just a few. And for me, I think the sadness of what is happening in the world, where we think we could solve the world's problems through violence and conflict, just seems to take over. And yet, in the midst of so much of destruction, we need to come back to preserving humanity, to saving human lives, to creating a better world for all people, to taking care of creation, and for establishing the good of this planet, which is not ours, but shared with us and given to us to use by our Creator, God Himself. And I really feel deeply concerned and called to continue this work. And sometimes it feels frustrating because one thinks, are we really having an impact? Is there a difference? And even though sometimes it may look as it is not the case, nevertheless, we must never give up. And the World Council of Churches will continue to persist in that. We will continue to call for peace. We will continue to work for peace. We will continue to pray that hearts and minds and lives will change. We will continue to pray that people will repent. And we continue to pray that we will take care of each other, that we will uphold human rights, preserve human dignity, and take care of this world, which is not ours, but God's world. And so I take this with me, and the deeper resolve and passion to continue to work for God's good in the world. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Dr. Pelé. We never give up. That's the strong message. Then I would like to turn to Dr. Abs. What do you take with you from a more personal point of view as the leader of the Middle East Christian Council of Churches? We have now spent 2 days in your region through online meetings.
As a matter of fact, I'm not taking, I'm sending with you, because what you have been living here for 2 days, we're living it every single day, every single moment, especially in my position where I'm connected to all the churches, to all the areas of the Middle East on almost daily basis. So what I would send with you is something which was already mentioned with many of you by His Grace, by General Secretary of WCC, by General Secretary of ACT Alliance. What needs to be done is really twofold. It is twofold. I mean, sort of message I sent to you to convey and to try to implement. The one side is the humanitarian side, which needs to be really, really dealt with deeply and profoundly to help people survive in that area. Not only with by sending funding, but also by sending whenever possible material aid, if possible, because not all the products are available there to help people survive. The survival is very, very tough, and we know that 80% of the population is in tents already, as we mentioned yesterday. What needs to be done too is the mobilization of the general opinion, the Christian ecumenical general opinion. 352 churches with all the dioceses and the parishes and the organizations related to them, plus the 160 or 70 organizations belonging to ACT Alliance. I mean, this is one of the biggest networks worldwide. From my side, I'm in connection with the Vatican to send them always messages about what's going on here. And we're very close to more than one dicastery over there. But let's stay on the ecumenical side. I mean, the WCC, ACT Alliance, and the related organizations. So what needs to be done is a remobilization, sensitization, a real attack, I would put it, quote unquote, a real challenge to the media over there, to the public opinion, to sensitize people to what's going on here, to know that aggression should stop, war will lead nowhere. The problem is that the governments are supporting the war. The problem is that you have to deal with the deep governments who are in possession of the arms, ammunition, and the oil companies, and who are controlling the world. But nevertheless, people should be aware and know day after day, and awareness is increasing. It's making a sort of snowball effect of what's going on here, not only here, but worldwide too, in many places in the world, but not as much as in this area. This area, you know, as you know, that the Palestinian cause is not only confined to Palestine, it has implications in all over the Middle East and the world, but mainly the Middle East. In Lebanon, the Palestinians were part of a problem in Lebanon, part, not cause, I insist. Part of a problem in Lebanon. In Syria, they were less. In Jordan, they were sometimes, and so on. These people are left with no perspective of better life. They're still living in tents for 3/4 of a century, in tents, in unacceptable, deplorable conditions of life, of hygiene, of food, and so on, even in tents, even in the camps outside the occupied territories. So these people need much material help, much support to be able to survive. They need to have their education supported. They need to have the UN taking care of them, not only the World Council and the related agencies and the ACT Alliance, because it's a big issue, it's a big problem, humanitarian one, which is having implication on the human and societal level in all these areas. Because these refugees are the weak part of the population, they always have to receive the repercussions of any political problems that are taking place in any of these governments. So this is part also to be considered. We have to mobilize the human rights people, the human dignity organizations, and so on, to be able to one day maybe reach somewhere and help with the end of this ordeal, which has lasted too long.
Thank you, Dr. Abs, and our thoughts and prayers are with you as the leader for the region.
Thank you.
And then I would like to turn to Alistair Dutton. You mentioned a little bit in your first presentation what you take with you, but maybe you can add a little bit also more from a personal point of view. You have been in the region many times from my understanding.
I think it's very difficult not to listen to what we've heard these last couple of days and for it to seem very, very bleak indeed. I think at one level, we see a level of hatred that it's difficult to think of parallels to. We've listened to people who genuinely believe that they and their people are being eviscerated from the country where they have lived for centuries, for millennia. And that is the crucifixion today. I'm reminded of the story in Elie Wiesel's book, Night, where he recounts an episode in Birkenau during the Second World War, where a young boy was taken to the front of the parade ground and was tied to a post and was shot in front of all of the prisoners of war. And one of the prisoners turned to a Christian who was in the prison and said, "Where is your God now?" And he just pointed at the boy at the front and said, "There he is." And it's difficult to remain hopeful given the stories that we've heard, given the way that people feel for themselves and given the rhetoric that we hear at the moment. And I think we somehow, and this is a real struggle, but we somehow have to remember that the Christian story doesn't end with the cross. It continues through the resurrection. And there are three things that last. And those are faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. And Caritas, of course, means love. And so my sincere hope through this is that love will break through, that as people of faith, we can rekindle a love between peoples that can somehow find the reconciliation that is needed and allow love and justice to prevail in the Middle East once more.
Thank you, Alistair. We keep faith, hope, and love in our heart. Then I would like to invite Rudemar de Buena Feira, who is the General Secretary of the ACT Alliance. And what do you take with you from a more personal point of view? And you have also many members across the world, and you have also a regional ACT forum.
Well, our members in the Middle East and the ACT Forum in Palestine, actually, as an organization, we share the same concerns they have. We support the actions they are taking. That is institutionalized somehow with the strong support from the more than 150 members of the ACT Alliance throughout the world. But from a personal perspective, what we discussed these 2 days, I have a mixture, unfortunately, not much in terms of hope, in terms of to deal with these injustices and impunity that we see in the Middle East. It's a mixture of frustration and even eagerness of seeing that there is no action taken by those that are supposed to govern the world based on principles that we as Christians have supported to create, like the Human Rights Charter. So it's very difficult for a humanitarian like me, that for more than 30 years I have been involved or seeing atrocities and conflicts. And it's sad to realize that most of them are caused and perpetuated because of the interests, economical and political interests. And we know that, but somehow we do not do anything against that. So from my perspective, from my personal perspective, what I will do as an individual is to continue to fight for justice, to fight against injustices, and to fight for the application of the humanitarian law as a humanitarian. We, as an organization, we are faith-based organizations, but we are also a faith-based, right-based organization. And you need to support these structures nationally, internationally, that are putting the frame for the violation of human rights. And the International Court of Justice ruling, it's something that we, as I personally want, is to support that. Because if you will not stop with this impunity that is also framing how people in different places in the world are now defining the way that's possible, then I don't believe that we will have a humanity that is aligned with what God wants from us. And it's another point is also to see the differences, how developed countries and underdeveloped countries act on that, the people. The challenges that they face on climate change or migration and displacement, and they are facing on a daily life, affecting their lives economically, politically, and culturally, how they are much more resilient and much more able to feel the pain of the people of Gaza and the West Bank. We see, of course, people suffering. Recently, a big flood happened in Brazil, in the south of Brazil. The people it's like the most tragical things, and it was tragical. But on the other hand, the cooperation, the understanding, the solidarity towards someone that is far away is not the same. And that we cannot continue to do that. Or we are humanity, or we will go for our individual borders again, how it was in the past. And that is certainly something that the church doesn't want to do. So I just renewing my commitment for justice, for just peace, for to fight against impunity. That are the issues that I will continue to do on a personal level.
Thank you very much, Romar. True justice, true human rights. Then I would like to turn finally to Bishop Heinrich Bedford-Strom. If I also invite you to maybe share a little bit more from a personal point of view.
Well, of course, I take with me all those stories of the people who are suffering that we have heard. And I do reflect upon it. And I do reflect upon it in light of something with which Dietrich Bonhoeffer has once described Christian existence: praying, doing justice, and waiting for God's time. We will continue to pray for the people in this context. But praying is always inseparably connected with doing justice. We will get engaged to make sure that international law is the basis for the future of this region. And the court of justice that is responsible for making judgments about international law must be respected. And in all this, I think the third part is very important, waiting for God's time. I don't think I could live without the hope that is entailed in this word, waiting for God's time. In the end, violence will not overcome, but all tears will be wiped away, and there will be no pain and no crying anymore. We have to wait for it, but we will wait for it, and we will live out of the power that comes from this hope that we as Christians have. I would hope that the media shows the stories of suffering no matter from where they come. We must overcome selecting the stories of suffering that we show. We must develop a radical sensitivity to suffering and show that suffering. In a modern media world, we have a dynamic where people watch videos and then always watch the same videos from the same perspective. That's how the algorithms work. And that means that very empathetic people, good people, who are touched by human suffering, if they do not go beyond their own context, they only see the suffering of their context. What we need to achieve and what we really need the media for is showing the suffering beyond your own reference group and beyond your own context. That is what I want from the media.
Thank you very much, Bishop Heinrich Bedford-Strom.
And to summarize my impressions of this particular online visit of solidarity and pastoral care for the people in Palestine and Gaza in particular, allow me to make the following points. We heard the cry of people from this particular context. The cry we heard is a cry of frustration, embraced in the question, how long do we continue to struggle with this? And we all know that this did not just start on October 7. This started long before that for many decades, the people of Palestine have been in oppression. We heard the cry for justice and peace. We heard the cry for the end of the war. We heard the cry for the release of detainees under administrative arrest. And we heard the stories of families who are pained, parents who are pained about the children being detained without charges. We heard the cry for humanitarian aid, support, and access. We heard the cry of doctors working under terrible conditions and circumstances, with little facilities, knowing that most of the hospitals have been destroyed, working under very terrible conditions, with shortage of medical supplies and drugs, and yet are doing the daily duty of caring for people who are facing death, who are struggling with sicknesses and also injuries from the war. We heard the frustration of people and government reflected on the call to the international world to stand with them in support because they do not feel all that supported. We heard the cry to participate in legal processes and to allow legal processes to take its course. We heard the cry in that for respect of humanitarian laws, dealing with human rights. We heard the cry that came so powerfully in expressions of saying we need to find solutions to the situation in the context. And most importantly, we also heard the commitment of people, commitment to journey with the people in Palestine, commitment from the people in Palestine to not give up in spite of their hopeless situation. They continue to exercise and express passion and desire to work for the upliftment of the people, to work for justice and for peace, and to address all the challenges that they continue to face. One of the things that inspired me a lot in this conversation was our conversations with the ecumenical accompaniers of the WCC. And they are there coming from different countries in the world who have placed themselves in this location of trouble, of conflict, of uncertainty, and at risk to themselves. But yet they're prepared to be there, prepared to be live witnesses in this context to share what is happening so that they could tell not only the member churches, but the rest of the world about the situation in Palestine, in Gaza. The wonderful aspect of this is that member churches are involved. Not many, few. And the cry is that more of our member churches in the World Council of Churches and other Christians will understand this whole issue of how we interpret the aspect of understanding the biblical Israel and the current Israel. And I think that's an important conversation that we have to engage and embark upon as we talk about the situation in Palestine and Israel, and particularly about Christian responses to the situation. But in concluding, I must say that we will continue our discussions. We're hoping to have an in-person visit again, this time with, I say again because I've been doing this already, but this time with the humanitarian organizations that we were supposed to go with into this context. We look forward to that. And I realize that the situation we deal with needs to continue to be worked at. Overall impression is that this was a very successful and appreciated conversation with the various people that we spoke with in this context. And I'm grateful for the opportunity that we were able to conduct a digital visit, despite the fact that we were not able to be there in person. I hope that these impressions will be able to communicate the seriousness in which we continue to journey with our people in that context.
And I would like to say a word of gratitude to all the members of the delegation for taking the time to share your insights and impression, and also the next phase of the work. This is a global organizations coming together for action for human rights, for human dignity and international law. So I would say thank you to all of you for taking the time, and more to come.
Thank you very much, Maria.
Right. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.